Okay, should we make a start then?
Yeah, go
Uh,
ahead.
Fantastic. So I'm just going to do the introductions. This is Rob Ward from CRA. A couple of things really. One is I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Jenny from the University of Manchester, who's going to bring us up to speed with what I think is some really interesting work that you're tackling head on, I guess, with students.
Yes.
And I had a look at the website that's in the link from the CRA homepage, and that talks about skills program, but I'm really interested, maybe more interested, by the some of the words that are used in the blurb around interaction, around innovation,
Yeah.
around exploration, around creativity, and above all around personal development, which is very much that kind of agenda. So welcome to everyone. I just want to say a couple of things which are really practical things. One is it's probably best if while Jenny is walking through the presentation, you mute your microphones. You'd be amazed what we can pick up and broadcast to the world, and that can be sometimes entertaining, but it's often quite difficult in terms of concentrating on what I'm just saying. So if I can encourage people to do that, and most people have, that would be great. And the other is just to remind you that probably on the right-hand side of your screen, where the control panel is, which you can pull out, there's a chat box, and you can write to any individual, or you can write to everyone. And what I think would be helpful to do is, as we go along, please jot down thoughts, questions, ideas, anything you want to say in that box, and we'll pick those up as we go along, or maybe towards the end of the presentation. So please make this as interactive as we can. Please go away having had your questions answered and your issues explored. And I'm going to hand on to Jenny. Brilliant that you're here. Thank you so much for doing this. I'm going to practice what I preach and mute my microphone and look forward to the session. Thanks, Jenny.
Hi everyone. It's lovely to have you here. Definitely let me know if at any time my voice gets blurry or you can't understand what I'm saying. I'll do my best to make sure that we keep to time, but I can get distracted by my enthusiasm for this area. So do pipe up with your questions as I'm speaking, just to make sure we get them answered. I'll do my best to keep an eye on them. I've got them on a separate screen, so I can see them as we're going along. And what I am going to talk about today is what we call My Learning Essentials. It's our skills support program it's delivered via the University of Manchester Library. And I'm going to speak about really what sets us apart and what we're trying to do here. That might be very different from what you would see elsewhere in the sector, and also the background, the kind of driving force underneath it, which has a lot to do with personal development and formative understanding, students' own understanding of their own development. So I'm going to go ahead and get started, but again, just sort of interrupt with a chat question if you have one. I'm going to give you that background that Rob was talking briefly about. We didn't go into this just thinking we need to deliver a skills program. I was involved in a research project previously called Hearing Student Voices, that some of you may have heard about it. And we asked ourselves a couple of really key questions there. We asked ourselves, what resources do students actually use? Or we asked the students. What support do students really need? And then finally, what does the university actually do? What do we already do? And where are the sort of, the central meeting points with those three questions? Interestingly enough, and a little bit dishearteningly, when we were asking the question, a lot of the times the students weren't using the resources that we were delivering to them. Either they weren't aware they existed, or they weren't quite the right resource. For example, oftentimes students will come to us and say, I don't understand referencing. And we would deliver a session on, for example, on EndNote, which is referencing software. But that doesn't answer their question about referencing. It actually just sort of puts a band-aid over the issue and gives them one way of addressing it. So when we came to talk about skill support at the library, we had those questions in mind, but we had the information the students themselves had given us. And then we had to ask ourselves, where should this sit? Should this sit in schools and faculties? Is this something that should be done, built into everyone's degree program? Is this something where you need to make sure everyone does it at the same time, or can students kind of pick it up and drop it as and when they need it? We decided, or luckily it was decided, that the library should act as a central resource for example, at least at Manchester, it's really the only place every student will go to at some point, even if it's only to pick up their ID card when they first arrive here. And we could use the library as a hub to join up service across the university. It also has the opportunity for really powerful interdisciplinary links. Our library went through a massive restructure about 5 years ago, and we no longer have subject-specific librarians. We have teams that address certain areas. So we have a teaching and learning team whose main remit is to transmit library skills, or whatever it is that we're training on, to students. And the idea there is actually that we're no longer delivering things solely to chemists or solely to physicists or solely to the humanities, but that we deliver it to anyone who needs it at the time. So it was decided on libraries where this would sit centrally. And that was because we needed every student to have access to it, and we needed to also control the consistency. Finally, though, we were very, very keen to make sure that there was a personal development element. And because of my previous experience with Hearing Student Voices, we looked at the HEAR, and we're trialing involvement with the HEAR as a place for students to record their journey, the way that they've come to understand themselves as a learner during their time at Manchester. Really what they're doing is they're creating a self-portrait. It's very, very important that they understand while they're at uni the skills that they need to address. What we did see during the Hearing Student Voices research project was that oftentimes at the end of their time here at uni there'd be a mass panic, wouldn't there? There'd be a third-year panic. I need all of this, I can't get employed, don't know what I'm doing, I need X, Y, and Z. But what we want is students entering university going, okay, these are the skills I have, these are the skills I'd like, or these are where I can improve, and what do I need to do, where are the resources for me to succeed in that way. With that in mind, we wanted to deliver support that was at the point of need, so students could access it when they needed it. It was very, very important to us, because what would happen to someone in their first year, might be that they needed something very specific, and then as they got more comfortable in their degree program, or as they figured out perhaps what they wanted to do after uni, they would have a different set of needs and kind of goals that would need to be addressed. Of course, this requires that the students are thinking about the goals and thinking about the needs, and we'll get to that later. Finally, we decided not to level or explicitly level any of our workshops or online resources. We don't name them beginning, advanced. We occasionally use the word introductory, as it's very important that maybe they know, if you've never done this before, try this area. But students look at the description and decide where it is they need to be and if this is what will help them. And what that's done is it puts the onus on the student to think, okay, where am I now? What do I need to get a little bit better? It also removes this idea that it might be remedial, because we're not telling a student previously, we're not diagnosing them and saying, you have a gap, here's what you need to do to fill the gap. This is a student saying, I'm having trouble, or I'm not having trouble, but I'd like to be really great at this. Where should I go? What should I do? Oh, this looks like it will work for me. We were really lucky at the same time to open the AGLC, that's the Alan Gilbert Learning Commons. It's an incredibly flexible learning space. Almost all of the furniture is movable. We've had couches migrating floors. In our lift, we had to quite quietly ask students, please don't do that. But the idea here is that this is a building for learning. Okay, this is something that it was a flagship building. It's our new site library, but it was built for the students as a flexible learning space. So there's actually, for example, almost no office space. I had to borrow my line manager's office to do this webinar, because really 99.9% of the space in here is devoted to student learning. It's a visible investment in what we want to do. There's a commitment to flexible learning. It's really, really important that what we do and what we say, we follow through on it. So there was student input throughout the building, and before it was built, they kind of told us what they needed based on what they'd experienced at the university. So they needed more group study spaces, they needed whiteboards, they needed things that would allow them to interact with what they had. And finally, we advocated quite strongly for a training room at the center of this space. The idea was the students were going to come here to learn, and they also should come here to then improve their learning. So what we were hoping is, instead of kind of waiting around for students to be in crisis, we could create a program that sat and just quite confidently and quite quietly supported them before it became an issue. So this is where they look while they're learning, not when they're in that crisis. With that in mind, I mean, this is a bookless library. We claim to be a paperless building, but we're not quite there yet. But we focus on what the students bring in with them. If you want to study here, if you need a book, you're going to have to bring it with you, or you'll have to access a journal, using one of the computers or your own laptop. So the idea here is what the student contains, their prior knowledge, everything they're carrying with them. That's the important bit. That's what you're going to use to learn. And so we're creating the experience of their learning with the students. And we're linking here the traditional library ideals of open access to journals, this idea that you come here to answer your questions and deep questions on your subject, with this really innovative space where there's an equal acknowledgement of student expertise, and of the idea that once you get to university, if you're here to join in the conversation on your topic. You're here to get passionate about what you're learning. You're not here to receive information and then kind of report it back. In fact, when we discuss things in workshops with students, we talk a lot about the fact that if you're being told you have a weak argument, it doesn't mean necessarily that it's your writing that's weak. A lot of times, actually, it's the critical reading. It's that element, the argumentative, the willingness to get in kind of a strop with the person you're analyzing. That's actually what's missing. So it came to be the My Learning Essentials. We termed it skill support with a twist. I'm sure marketing never let that through to the students though. So if you don't tell any of my students, that would be lovely. One aspect of it is face-to-face support, and that's the one where I'm most deeply involved in, and I run that section of the program. In this section, we have a couple of key requirements. First of all, there's an opportunity for students to co-create sessions, and if we have time, I'll show you some of our slides, but what it normally is we build an agenda together. So everyone's expertise is valued. We look at the students who are in the room with us and think, what do we need to get out of this session? That requires a level of commitment from the trainers, because obviously it's difficult to go into a room at all and deliver a workshop. It's even more difficult to go into a room and perhaps deliver a slightly different workshop every single time. But what we found is using everyone's experience really makes the workshops worthwhile, and it identifies that personal development element. The students are not coming to be told how to do something. They're coming to kind of explore possible ways to do something and make their own decisions. We don't claim expertise that we don't have. I try not to claim expertise at all, really. And we make sure that there's a facilitative and interactive model. Finally, we have a skills emphasis in the program. And what that means is actually we have partnerships from across the university. So we have people from the Manchester Museum come in and deliver. And they might bring in a bit of rubble from Hiroshima and discuss how to research provenance using this bit of rubble as a model and a module. But the skill they're using and the skill they're transmitting to the students is critical analysis, it's database searching, okay, it's understanding of primary sources versus secondary sources, but they're using their own expertise in the area as a museum to kind of transmit using a different sort of content. And it's fascinating to watch the different levels of engagement, because we don't promote our workshops to anyone in particular, not undergrads, not versus postgrads, not the humanities versus the sciences. Every single one of them, you see a different group of students turn up, and they all react differently, and they create a different session. We also run mini kind of drop-ins where we'll have 15 minutes, and we always say no answers, only directions. Okay, so you come, and we won't tell you how to make the perfect thing, but we will make sure that you can figure out where to go next, whether it's a workshop or a resource within your own school or faculty. Now, there are 40,000 students in Manchester, so we can't deliver face-to-face workshops for all of them. What we've decided to do instead is My Learning Essentials has a core suite of online resources, and we originally built the first set were on library skills, because that's where the content expertise was in the team. They're accessible 24/7, so it goes back to the idea of students self-selecting at the point of need. Sometimes the point of need is 2 in the morning before your essays due. We've had almost 30,000 hits since the launch, and over 7,000 unique visitors. And those numbers are a little deceptive because we only launched the first bit of them in late October, and most of them didn't properly get launched until mid-November, really right before the Christmas break, and we had a massive spike during revision. So, a good third of those hits have come in January and since January. And the ones that we create, what we do is we take the workshops that are most popular, and we turn them into online resources. And this does 2 things. One, what we can do with that is we can take the online resources, and they're made in a program called Articulate Storyline. And Articulate is embeddable in Blackboard. So if a school or faculty asks, we can hand them an online resource that they can embed for a particular module. And these cover everything from plagiarism to database searching. We have a few on academic writing. We're currently developing more. And we have a few on sort of EndNote and other referencing skills. And it also means that what we can do is we can take those sessions that, quite frankly, we could deliver 9 to 5 every single day and have them full. And actually, we don't deliver them anymore. Then we go out and we look for the little niche ones, the ones where out of 40,000 students, maybe it's a couple thousand who are struggling with this area. But it doesn't quite work for them to have an online resource, and that's what we deliver. So we're trying to serve our entire population, but not by having face-to-face workshops. We're trying to have the broad, sweeping needs served with this online resource, and then the very specific ones served face-to-face. And what that allows us to do is really play around with the idea of what belongs in a workshop. And we've started modifying them to, one of the problems of being in a building that's meant to be really, really earth-friendly is that the lights turn off if you don't move enough. So what will happen is we're trying to use these workshops even to push students into being more independent. And they're flexible and responsive. So I promise the students that if I get 6 students to ask, so if they either ask in a workshop on a feedback form, if they let us know via, we have a kind of suggestion box on the webpage, we will develop, design, and deliver a workshop within 3 weeks of the request. Because out of 40,000 students, if 6 students need it, I can find 24 others to kind of fill the room the first time. To fill the room the first time. And then, go on from there. And a lot of times, the ones that the students are requesting are the ones that have turned into our most popular workshops. Of course they are, because these are students identifying what they need, and it's us delivering it. And the nice thing about that is it's almost a co-formative development plan, because the students say, I need to get better at this. And we say, okay, is this what you need to get better? And then they let us know whether that served the need, if it did or didn't, and what we can do to improve. And at the same time, we're helping them along the way. And we're also, by listening so carefully to what they say, they're so used to on national student surveys and other things, telling us what to do so the next group of students can be happier. But I feel like we so rarely say, what can I do for you right now? What do you need? So they really appreciate the opportunity to say, oh gosh, you know what really helped? I need a session about how to read journal articles. I get bogged down. How do I strategically read them? And then we put that on, and they turn out to be our most popular ones. Another thing that happened is they'll ask us for things like, well, I love the academic writing support, but I don't have any friends who can read my papers. And so things that have happened there is we've transformed some of our sessions. There'll be 10 minutes of sort of interactive instruction. We'll do a couple activities, maybe 20 minutes on proofreading. And then they'll have 90 minutes in our training room with laptops, with tea and coffee, and with the rest of the students, and they trade drafts. We've created a writing group. And so the idea is they attend an academic writing workshop, they get the help they need, they get their paper drafted. Then they come to a proofreading workshop if they still want more further help. They learn some things about proofreading, and they have a writing group that's formed around them, sort of without them having to reach out or figure out who would work in that kind of group for them. And then finally, they'll take that group out into the main building. Then they'll book a study room, and they won't be in our training room anymore. They kind of moved out and become independent. It's a bit like watching them graduate. And they'll then push along to other people what they've learned here. And the focus is always on how can I get better? Not what am I doing wrong, but how can I get better? So it's not about going from a miserable mark to a brilliant one. It's not even about going from a 2-2 to a 2-1, but it's really about drilling down to this idea that everyone, wherever they are on a continuum, can improve. And we can all help each other improve together. So it doesn't matter where you begin, because we're all just trying to move forward. Now, we're trying to think about making the students the resource, and we're also really concerned with building a complete self-portrait. So when I say it's a skills support program, and I talk mostly about academic skills because I tend to do the training on those, but we're really thinking about a lot of other things, making the students the resource, but also making them almost a resource for themselves. So we spend a lot of effort. We work with partners in careers and our University Language Centre to work about thinking about the link to transferable skills. So we want students to proactively build a skill set for their lives after university. And this goes back to this idea that it doesn't matter what content is delivered as long as there's a skills focus. So we'll have sessions delivered by non-careers people on presentations for interview, or memorization tips for presentations. And at the same time, in those sessions, we'll discuss, of course, this isn't only great when you're presenting in front of academics. When you need to do a presentation, for example, at an interview or assessment center, you're using the same skills that you've identified. So it's really, really important that you connect what you're doing academically to the real world, for lack of a better term. But what we want to do at Manchester, we want to shape independent and innovative thinkers. We don't want people, we want our students to look at things and say, I don't know, is that correct? We don't want them to assume because it's been handed to them by an academic or because they found it in a journal that that's the truth. And most of the time, the examples I use in my sessions are things that have been retracted from journals, things where it turned out there was a mistake in it, and that someone else found and pointed out, sometimes many, many years later. Because it's the students, these are the people who are going to be reading these articles later on that we're assuming are correct now and cutting edge now. And they're going to be responsible for making sure that the conversations move forward. But these are the skills they have to carry with them, this idea of critical analysis, not accepting what they're told, always arguing back, that then weaves back into becoming a better academic writer, becoming better at presenting, even becoming better at revising. Engaging with your subject makes you better at revising for an exam. It's when you don't care or when you're so bored that you can't connect to it that you really struggle. And then finally, we flip the expertise, and this has been, a place of learning for everyone, for trainers and students alike. But we try not to place ourselves as trainers as the source of answers. Okay, we're there to give directions and we're there to give support. So a lot of our work as trainers has been on our own personal development and on revealing that development to the students and saying, I don't know. How do you think we should figure that out together? What do you think the next step should be? And that does two things. It forces the students to take responsibility because they can no longer rely on a workshop or a drop-in or even an email to someone that, if they figured out one of us. But they can't find the answers from us. So it's really, really important that they understand that actually the expertise is found kind of in the process and not from the person. And quite frankly, that's a change for libraries. Libraries were once the place where you found things, where the answer was found. You went to ask, someone looked it up for you or told you how to look it up. And that's where it was. And now we're saying, well, we're creating the answer together. But a lot of these answers or processes are even richer because of the cross-discipline element and because of a multi-year collaboration that happens, where we get first-year undergraduates, working with people who are here getting a master's degree, or even occasionally staff members who come to our sessions. And there's a level of understanding that wouldn't occur otherwise. And that we're really embracing and able to feed into the content, for example, in our online resource. And then finally, the students are responsible for building their own learning. It's really, really important that they understand that they're putting it together. There's too many of them for us to put it together for them, and it's inappropriate developmentally for us to kind of push it along. But if they create the resource they need in the moment they need it, then what they're doing is they're taking that ownership back, we hope. Okay? It's really, really important that when they look at my learning essentials, they not look at it as almost a crutch or something to lean on, but it's almost, we're like a gust of wind, right? We can push them along that little bit further, but then we're meant to disappear. And we're really having an interesting conversation here, because there's a question I've seen about students as consumers. A lot of times people go, well, yes, of course, they're paying £9,000. They're expecting this kind of support. I mean, quite frankly, they were expecting this kind or looking for this kind of support before they were paying £9,000. And on one level, if we let them into the university, if they've succeeded in getting into a degree program, it's our responsibility then to help them succeed. So they certainly were right to expect it. On another level, by innovating in this way, I think what we're doing is changing it from a product that we deliver to something the students are responsible for inputting in. And that takes it away from that little bit of entitlement of leaning back, right? Is this good enough for me? Have I, if I gotten out of this what I deserve, to, well, if I don't get out of it what I deserve, it could be because I didn't put into it what was needed. So we're combining feedback, critical reading skills, and then expertise to really get them connecting with their degree program. Because in the end, what's going on a lot of times is Some of them are meeting students that are doing the same degree that they've never met before, but most of the time they're meeting students who are doing something completely different. And then they're explaining what they do, and there's a level of real excitement when you tell someone why you're getting the degree you're getting. Why are you doing geography? Well, I really like volcanoes, is what came up once. And telling someone who is not in geography about all the exciting things about volcanoes can be a really nice moment, and it can reconnect you with your original enthusiasm, especially in that second year where we find a lot of the students, they don't have a dissertation due, but they're not panicking because they've kind of made it through 1 year. They're not really sure what they should be doing. But in the end, they become responsible for what's next. And that was that seminal question about feedback, is the missing link with feedback, with students getting it and saying, okay, well, that explains the mark I've gotten, but that's it, that's all it does, it explains the mark I've gotten. And what we do in our sessions, and what we try to do in the drop-ins and with the online resources, is make the students go, okay, this is what I've been told, now what do I do? So they turn it into an action. So instead of it being reactive and being upsetting, right, being something where you're being told you're not good at something, it's turned into an opportunity. It's turned into something that they need to do now. And what we're hopefully going to see soon, we're working with academics to actually put things together that are titled Understanding Feedback, Using Feedback, so we can make it explicit. Because I think a lot of the time we assume when we write things like weak argument, the students know what we mean, which could be a whole range of things, quite frankly, but often means you've not convinced me. Well, you've not convinced me isn't you've not written enough. It's not you didn't refer to the right people. It's usually a really complex amalgamation of things, and it doesn't tell students where to go next. So hopefully by opening the dialogue with academics and by saying, you know, we're putting this together, we're going to try and support the students. What kinds of things are you seeing? What should we address? We're also going to support the students who get the kind of feedback that maybe doesn't really help them move forward. And then finally, so what I'm going to talk about is a little bit of further partnerships, and then I'm going to take you on a tour of the website and one of our online resources. But our partnerships right now range across the university. So we, as I was saying previously, we work with the Manchester Museum. We work with our own John Rylands. We have an amazing special collections kind of traveling book unit. They're the ones that are okay to touch. So they'll bring them in here and they'll talk about, you know, conservation, and they'll talk about how do you decide what information is important enough to house in a museum? You know, where's the line drawn? And then in this day and age, when it feels like you can just kind of keep increasing the size of your hard drive, how do you tell what's the important information? And they're transmitting these kinds of skills, and at the same time, students are touching books that are, you know, hundreds and hundreds of years old and absolutely beautiful. And a lot of them would never, the John Rylands Library is not attached to the main campus, so they wouldn't make their way down there. It's a 20-minute walk. It's not towards the uni bar. It's just somewhere the students don't usually go, and I think they're quite intimidated. The building's a little bit intimidating. So at the same time, we're kind of introducing students to the cultural assets available at this university that they wouldn't see otherwise. We work with our University Language Center, which has traditionally supported international students, but they're being really generous with their time and branching out and helping home students as well, or anyone who comes to their workshops, discover and understand, you know, what's a strategic way to read a journal article. How should you look at something from a cultural perspective? If you're in sociology and analyzing, for example, you know, first-hand writings from a particular culture, what are some key areas you need to be aware of? And at Manchester, we're starting to see this idea that undergraduates themselves should learn through research. So they should participate in the, you know, in what this university really focuses on, which is this research that we do. So they should learn as they're researching something. So we are trying to break apart the skills, these essential research skills, and support students with them as well. We've just been asked to do numeracy support, so that will be interesting. As someone who's not a maths expert, we're definitely looking for kind of expertise in that area. We're already working with some people to develop an online resource in statistics, and we're kind of looking around and trying to see if we can create those modified study sessions like we do for proofreading around maths topics. So if you come in with your problem sets. You know, we do a couple exercises hopefully that will help you solve them, but then it turns into a group study session where we're all helping each other. And the best thing about that is what we've started doing at the end of the modified study sessions is all of the students come together and they write down what they learned that day. And then we take that and we disseminate it back out. So any strategies that they come up with or anything where they go, oh my gosh, I'm going to do it this way from now on, not only gets passed on to everyone within that group, but we post it on the website, or we send out an email, or we quite frankly we nick it and we integrate it into our workshops, and we make sure it gets passed along. And at the same time, we tell the students, this came from you. These are your ideas. We're literally just here to make sure everyone learns about them. We're passing along best practice, not just from the staff members who come and deliver, but also from the students who attend. And I think this idea that they own the program, that they're contributing to it, is something that really makes them step up during the workshops and really put the time in. Because I know we've all delivered some kind of lecture or training or been at a conference where you feel like there's someone in the room who's not connecting and who's making it a little bit difficult for you to make sure what you're doing is correct. And this seems to be really smoothing that over. And then finally with the HERE, Manchester has been one of the pilots of the HERE, and it's, there we go, Manchester's been one of the pilots of the HERE, and it's also contributed, I think, to shaping some of it. And what we've done with ours is, first of all, we thought, okay, we don't want to put just one workshop on a HERE. We need the commitment that goes on the HERE to be one where it's been a student identifying areas of where they want to improve, and then really either attending a number of workshops or somehow translating that into impact that we could track or they could track and verify. So what we're thinking of now is not only this idea of academic skills verification, possibly employability skills verification, but perhaps some larger My Manchester essentials verification. So this is a student who's committed to helping, not just themselves but others, or they've taken what they've learned and passed it along. In some fashion, they've really engaged with the campus and engaged with their degree program and engaged with other students in a way that is different from someone who came and had a good degree and had a good experience, but maybe didn't really have that level of engagement. And it's a powerful place to be. And because the resource we have is limited, there's 3 people in my particular team. There's about 6 others I draw on regularly, and then 2 people in our e-learning team who work flat out all the time. We're trying to walk a fine line between, if we want to put it on the HERE, it needs to be available enough that students who are committed, can fulfill the requirements, but it needs to also be meaningful enough that students who do fulfill the requirements feel like they've done something extra. Because that's where we've positioned ourselves. It's not remedial. You're not told to do it. This is something you do because you're interested, you're committed, you want to do something next. And so that's where we are right now. We're kind of negotiating that space. We're talking about, is it a number of workshops, or is it a written element, or is it something to do with other things that they're doing on campus? But we're really trying to figure out a way where this is about personal development. So it's not about, I would like this to appear on my HERE because it will probably look good, which is very flattering. But it's about, I see this as something I want to do. I see this as something that will benefit myself and hopefully others. And how do we show that on the HERE? And then finally, though, one of the most powerful things that I can show you, I think, and do let me know via the chat box if it's not working, is the website itself. So this is My Learning Essentials. I have to admit that we're going to change all of the themes. So don't get too attached to finding things like via writing skills, because mostly this was created this summer, or this previous summer, where most of our things were library skills oriented. So while it worked then, many of our partner things were kind of shoehorning in. So we're going to be changing a few things. But what we do is we basically point the students here and we say, look, these are things that you've told us you need. And you've told us you need them from a variety of different places. So what we try and do is give them a place, for example, writing skills. And they can have a look, and there's online resources and workshops. So if it's 2 in the morning and they desperately need help, and quite frankly I think most of them find it by Googling things like University of Manchester, writing skills support, this will pop up and they'll be able to get the help they need right then. But if they're slightly more proactive, they might have a little bit more time, they can scroll down and we have a variety of workshops that they can book on. So things from content and resources to structure to that proofreading workshop I talk about quite a bit. those are all available, and there's multiple sessions of them to try and make sure that the students who need them can get on. We also are really generous in terms of sending out slides or just contributing anytime a student asks for kind of a little bit of a bump. We try and make sure that the resources that we have in the workshops are available either online or via drop-ins or via their academic advisors in some way. But always we're asking students, okay, look at this. Is this what you need? So the online resources themselves we're really proud of, because what we've done is we've been really, really careful with these. We want to make sure that anything that was delivered online was created to be delivered online. So they're not replications of our workshops. And most of the time, when I work with Jade Kelsall, who's our e-learning technologist, these make my workshops better. I just sat down with her and did one on organization for writing skills. And I came away so excited that there's a workshop I was going to deliver Monday that I probably delivered half a dozen times maybe without changing it. And I've just spent the better part of yesterday afternoon and this morning completely redoing it, because what we discovered when we were talking about was so powerful that I quite frankly just got overly excited and can't wait to share with students. So these are created to be exemplary online resources, and they're created from what we hope are really good face-to-face workshops, but they're not just lifted in a way that students are used to. A lot of times, for example, with our Blackboard system, the online bit is either a quiz that's connected to the slides or just the slides themselves, or maybe an opportunity to have an online chat around the slides that were in a lecture, but they're not necessarily things that have been created just to sit online. And so you can see there's a major difference in them. And so what I was going to show you, and just so you know, there's sound involved in this one, so don't be surprised if you hear some noise. This is the one we've created on plagiarism. The library was asked to take the lead for the university on copyright, and part of that, well, we volunteered. Part of that was us creating something for students and staff about plagiarism and about understanding it, because there's a difference between struggling to understand a topic and kind of summarizing it for your own understanding, and then obviously not citing it. But a lot of times what we found with students was they didn't understand where you would start telling the story. Where do I start telling people that this is someone else's idea? And what they would often do actually is err on the side of quoting too much, right? They have too much in there from other people. They're citing all the time, and there's no original thinking. There's no critical analysis. So then it doesn't work either way. So they may not have plagiarized because they were quite scared of that. But they've also not answered the question. They don't get very high marks. They really struggle with their academic writing. So when we sat down to develop this one, we started thinking about something else instead. So we talk about, obviously, the different parts. You'll notice that some of the format is a little bit the same as our workshops, in that we set an agenda, okay, and we try and be very explicit with the students what we're going to go over. But we really want to take advantage of things that are available. And it's a little noisy. Sorry if you have to turn down your mics. So here we talk about, it says, so that would be what the commentator says. I say my critical analysis of the situation, and so this is what we should think about moving forward. But by putting this in the context of our conversation in the pub, I think originally it was something people getting upset about match of the day. Then what we're trying to help the students understand is that, again, this goes back to them being engaged in their degree, engaged in their program. They're joining a conversation. And in fact, journals, and these articles that you're reading and analyzing, and this tradition you're joining of writing scholarly articles, goes back to this idea that we can't all stand in the same room together and converse. Benjamin Franklin used to write letters to these other scientists in France, and everyone used to kind of trade back and forth their ideas. And so it's this concept that you're joining in a conversation that often makes the concept of plagiarism more clear to students. And this came about because of the way we taught workshops, because we weren't just delivering them to students, standing up in front of a room and saying, this is plagiarism, you need to avoid it, this is what you do to avoid it, here's how to reference. But instead, joining in with the conversation with the students, we're able to develop now a resource that makes things clear, because we're speaking with the same kind of voice and using the same vocabulary that our students are. And one of the things we're trying to figure out with this, of course, is how do we make this even more interactive? There's a lot of chances to write in your own opinions. There's a lot of case studies. There's a lot of, we have different activities where you can correct things in our proofreading one. But there's not the kind of group interactivity that we find in our workshops or our modified study sessions. So what we're trying to do now with this is we're thinking about using Twitter. We're thinking about using other kind of social media or other online devices. How do we bring what students are doing within these workshops into a greater conversation? How do we have them take their online resource and then add to it there? Because again, we don't want these to be static. They're not going to stay up there forever. What we're doing for responses at the moment is when you get to the end of a resource, there's an opportunity to feedback, and we take them. And again, it's almost like the workshop. So if we hear a half dozen people or so ask for something, or if someone, for example, points out a typo, we try and sort it really, really quickly. And we also deliberately then reply to those students and make sure that they understand the reason we're taking this action was that they asked for it. And sort of please let us know, come to whatever it is, if it's a workshop, or look at the new online resource and let us know, is this what you were thinking of when you said I needed X or I needed Y? And, we like keeping the conversation going. But on the same level, we're kind of at the moment where we have enough online resources that we can promote them. This is a great suite. In fact, they're available to anyone. They don't sit behind the Manchester University login in the same way that, for example, booking on a workshop does. So anyone, anywhere, can look at the resources and use them. And we really, we want to keep that as the way we do it. We want there to be a whole conversation around skill support, around understanding what students are doing, and around developing yourself and always becoming better. But we're struggling now with where we have the conversation. How do we record it? Who do you talk to? Do you give priority to certain voices in the room? What are you going to do to make sure that the conversations that are happening are meaningful and aren't sort of prompted by some kind of event or a hashtag or a real big marketing push? We want it to become a habit of students. What we're trying to do partially,
and drop in that you might have to complain about this and see what you learn.
What we're trying to do partially is make sure that students during revision understand that we've got this element of interactivity online, and we're going to at the very least have them pushing a hashtag for top revision tips from students. We're going to have an Ask a Librarian or Ask an Academic Skills Advisor is the rather lengthy hashtag we came up with. Sort of events during revision, and what we're hoping is that we get more highly engaged students, because it is a time of crisis, and we can kind of play with the idea of having a conversation around these online resources. But we're quite lucky. I mean, we have seen 25,000 hits, so people are using them. A lot of them are students at the University of Manchester. However, we do, when we have a lot of tours, we have quite a few tours in the AGLC, and we have tours from widening participation students or from people from other universities. We do encourage them to have a look and also contribute to the conversation, because the reality is that you can get very bogged down in the day-to-day events of what you're doing, and we can quite frankly kind of frantically try to keep delivering what students need without looking at the bigger picture. And Jade Kelsall, who runs the online elements, and myself are very keen to make sure that holistically what we're delivering is meaningful not only to the students who are here, but almost as a whole for the university. So what are we supporting, and should we always ask ourselves, are we the people who should be supporting this? Is this within the scope of My Learning Essentials? Or is this something where we say, okay, you're struggling with it, we're going to make sure your school knows you're struggling with this, and your degree program and your faculty, and we'll offer our help in developing something, but actually it doesn't sit within the support we give. At the same time, we're freeing up academics in many ways who got questions on plagiarism, on academic writing, on presentation skills that they perhaps couldn't answer or were uncomfortable answering. And they can now either refer to our online resources, some of them attend our workshops, they can send students to our workshops, and we're removing that element of anxiety from the relationship, and we're almost allowing them to go back to talking about, okay, as in your degree program, what are you looking at as a complete personal development plan? We also are really, really careful about tracking people who attend our workshops. We're really quite lucky in some ways. We have a bit of a creaky booking system, but it does serve its purpose. We can tell all the way down to the degree program the students who are booking on, and we require everyone to sign in on a register when they come in, and we produce monthly dashboards on the statistics. We break it all the way down to the degree program, so we know exactly which students come in. And we're also trying to make sure that we can compare that to footfall in the building. We compare it to other months previous, and we try and see, are we seeing the same students, are we seeing new students? It was interesting during revision, most of our students, we kind of have a 30-30-30 split between undergraduate, postgraduate research, postgraduate taught in our term time workshops right now. During revision, it was over 60% undergrad. So, and many of those students never even been in the building. So it was an interesting difference, between what we normally deliver. And what we do right now is we're trying really hard to make sure that we're kind of accurately hitting the spread of the uni. If we're not, if we see spikes, we tend to talk to the school. So if I see a lot of nursing and midwifery students in academic writing all of a sudden, I'm lucky enough to be able to flag an academic engagement librarian who will go to this students staff liaison committee meeting in that school and say, we're seeing a lot of students in academic writing, is there something going on? And a lot of times there will be an assignment, but the academics themselves wouldn't have known students were struggling because they've come to us first. And so there's a nice dialogue that goes on, thinking about what are we delivering, why are we delivering it, who's taking it up, and what does that mean for the degree programs themselves. In terms of defining things like transferable skills, and we'll answer this question and then I think we can move to kind of having a chat, but we've not defined per se transferable skills. We tend to actually talk about transferring your skills from academics to employability, and there's a couple reasons for that. Partially it's because transferable makes it seem like it's an entirely separate skill set they might need to acquire, and a lot of students come in, they're asking, what do I need to attend to get transferable skills? And you're like, well, actually, these are things you usually already have, but you want to maybe slightly tweak them or improve them, and then you can transfer them to a different area, either employability or something in your personal life or whatever it is. So they're taking things you already have, perhaps making them better, certainly making them more widely applicable. And then the other reason is that, quite frankly, I don't think we've paused since we decided to launch this program. One of the things we're looking forward to this summer is the opportunity to kind of take a deep breath, look at the themes we've created on that webpage, look at the online resources we've created, and really think, okay, are we delivering what we need to deliver? Are we within scope, even though we keep asking ourselves? Are we overstretching and to the detriment of the program? Or are we doing it just right, and then should we continue with the model we have? We're quite keen to demonstrate that, well, two things. First of all, that of course there's a demand, but also that it's a demand that's prompted by the students. So it's not us throwing staff at something on a hunch. It's quite frankly, throwing staff at something because there's enough students asking for it. And I think when we swap the conversation and we make it about what students are asking for, it puts us in a more powerful position, and actually a more tenable position, a more justifiable position, where we can say, we're doing this because the students need us to. And also when the students need us to do something different, because we've built in this kind of, is this what you want? Okay, we'll turn it into online resource, and then we'll keep looking for what you want next. Because we've built in this flexibility and this almost impetus for change, we're not going to keep delivering the same things just because we delivered them in the last year. And I think that's almost the hardest place to be, because a lot of us as trainers are used to training, but we're used to training the same thing. We kind of rock up, we've got our favorite areas, we feel confident and comfortable, and instead what we're trying to do is really think about our audience. So it's not about us being comfortable, it's about our audience and what they need and what do we need to change. And with that in mind, we have a lot of things that we have ongoing in the background in terms of admin. We've got workshop plans for every single session, so that details timings, content, any kind of handouts. all of the slides we have in a central database. So it has two purposes. One, if anyone's ill, we can cover, so we don't need to cancel because of illness or anything else. And then secondly, it allows people to volunteer for things they're interested in. So what tends to happen is they'll say, okay, I normally deliver X, but I feel like I could perhaps come and deliver Y. I'll observe a session, I'll co-train a session, and then I'll train a session. And then we have almost, geometrically increasing resource. And people are able to reach out into areas where maybe they don't normally get to teach, and there are areas where they're excited, because again, it goes back to that content. They might change the content focus, but the skills focus will always be the same. So, they might not, if they're not from the museum, they won't have a bit of rubble from Hiroshima. But we have someone from the Whitworth Art Gallery who comes in with a giant rug and talks about, she uses textiles as her way in, and she talks to the students about ideas being woven together and about theme and organizational structure in presentations based on this piece of textile, based on the idea that although the colors might change, often the pattern is echoing itself. So when you put together a presentation, although what you're saying is going to be different on every slide, people are expecting a rhythm or a pattern or an underlying theme of some sort, and that's what makes them more powerful. And so it's really turned into an opportunity for a lot of our training staff to kind of reach out. At the same time, as always, opportunities are usually a lot of work. So we're looking forward to a little bit of a slowdown in the summer. That being said, we did just volunteer to help with the widening participation things that happen in the summer, so it might not slow down at all. But that's the theory at the moment. That's all I have right now in terms of presentation. We've got just under 10 minutes, so I didn't know if there was anyone who had any questions.
Folks, we can put questions in the chat, or
yes.
People can unmute their microphones. I just would like you more people thinking, Jane, if you wouldn't mind, just to say just a little bit about the widening participation initiative. And in a sense, is that about almost inducting pre-HE students into the kind of HE world? Or, oh, that was good. Wasn't that a question? Or are there other things involved? Just maybe say 30 seconds about that.
Of course. So the program where we're probably most involved, there's a few of them, but it's called MAP, so it's the Manchester Access Program. And this is students who are targeted for specific schools with low socioeconomic status, the schools themselves. And they're almost deliberately guided into Manchester, so they're given mentors and they're given a path that unlocks for them what might be kind of mystifying, this idea of being able to apply for uni. So what we're looking at doing is twofold. One, we're working with their tutors, their mentors, and our online resources to make sure that the mentors can translate what's there and the students are comfortable using them. So if they do attend Manchester, they've actually already almost brought themselves up to level, or they know they have an in. They know what we do to support the students who are already here. They might have already gone through it, so they'll feel more comfortable there. We also try and make sure that they get introduced to us. So that they know there's staff available to help and the kinds of things we'll do. We're probably going to run a modified version of our workshops. But finally what's happening is they're taking our formative, interactive, facilitative module and they're changing what gets delivered to WP. Because a lot of it was a lecture. This is what it's like at uni. I stand in front of a room and I tell you what it's like at uni. And instead we're kind of encouraging this idea, we'll come in and teach them a skill. Improve something, have them walk away not only knowing more about Manchester, but also feeling more confident in some other area. So we're going to pilot a couple of instances of that as well. But most of it, as I said, will be sort of through the Manchester Access Program.
Okay, thank you. I mean, and that sounds like it's being true to the philosophy of the program in the sense of moving out of a kind of didactic mode into a collaborative mode.
Yes. I don't like standing in front of a screen and talking the whole time, so it would be difficult.
I think we're doing a lot of it today. Okay, are there other issues that people want to come back to? The recording and the slides will be available for reference later on. But now's the chance to get issues raised or questions checked out. It's hard to know whether people are typing questions or just
Yes.
typing.
Yes. As always, guys, if you do have further questions and you'd like to email and ask, or you want to come visit, it would be, we'd love to have you come. We do allow people to come observe the sessions, so if you have a look and there's something you're interested in, just let us know. Otherwise, though, we're always here to help, and we want to hear what you think about these sessions and about our online resources, because there's something to be said about doing it first, but there's something really terrifying, and it can be quite kind of blinkering doing it first. You get very involved in what you've done, and so you keep thinking that's the only way it can be done, and there's got to be both better ways and different ways than what we've chosen to do, and so I think the new ideas we can get from the sector would be extremely valuable. Especially making sure it always comes back to this idea of students' personal development and not just us ticking boxes and helping them with things they're kind of scared about. And I'm quite keen to make sure our program always has that element where they're looking to improve, and they're looking to improve based on a goal or a plan. But that's a goal, and you can't get not a guarantee.
Of course, that man is championships. Themselves played a huge part in this team. Set up this team about 3 years ago at the front end. Took these young boys to World Championships and picked up.
I'm going to suggest we call a halt there. We're
Okay.
almost out of time.
Yes.
And I can hear all sorts of realities from people, different worlds intruding. I can just thank Jenny on everyone's behalf and to remind you of what you just said, which is you can come and visit.
Yes.
And it doesn't always rain in Manchester. In the
No, it's lovely right now.
Okay, so thank you ever so much, Jenny. That's been brilliant, as I thought it would be, as I knew it would be. And thanks everyone for joining in, and keep in touch.
Yes. See you all later. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, so this is shaping up a nice shot from Greg Drummond, written was line 2 and tucked in